We can go ahead and get started with the questions. So, can you just introduce yourself with your name and pronouns?
Hello, my name is Robbi A. Moore, and my pronouns are they, them, or just my name, Robbi.
Can you tell me a little bit about your dancing journey?
My dancing journey, I started dancing when I was 5 years old. I was sort of inspired by my older brother, who was an actor. I was a little kid and I saw him on stage. And I told my mom, like, I want to be on stage. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I want to be a dancer necessarily, because I didn't know what that was. But I did say I want to be on stage. And then she put me into ballet classes because she saw that a studio was looking for kids to be in their Nutcracker.
Mhm.
So that's how it all started. That was New England Ballet. And then I ended up moving on to other things when I was around 7, a studio called Dee Dee's Dance Center that I was at for the majority of my childhood after that until I graduated high school. And I also started doing summer intensives, Earl Mosley's Institute of the Arts, where I actually met a lot of people that I would later get to know as an adult in New York, going to the Ailey School for the Ailey Fordham BFA program. So that was just sort of like the beginning of all of those connections. And those connections are what inspired me to push forward and actually, pursue going to school in New York City. I'm from Connecticut. So it was really close. And yeah, I also went to New Haven Ballet when I realized I had gone there for a little bit, and I started going there more consistently when I realized I wanted to audition for the Ailey Fordham BFA program, and I wanted more ballet training just to be ready for that program. Even though it's a modern dance school, they do require an extensive amount of ballet training for people, or to get at least up to par where they will accept you into the school and then they will train you further. I did dance in New York City after graduating the Ailey Fordham BFA program. I graduated in 2015, and I danced for the Steps Repertory Ensemble during the last year of its existence. So the studio Steps on Broadway had a company that did concert dance rep, and it was a wonderful experience. I was also my senior year of college, I started dancing with a company called Amanda Selwyn Dance Theater. They're actually in dance. I still follow them. They're actually in Dance Magazine right now. There's a small little blurb about, companies that were like trying to survive the pandemic and what they did. So I still sort of like follow their work. I was in that company for 2 years. And then I also danced for a Bollywood company called Atma Performing Arts. And they had a touring show called Mystic India. And there was a touring show and there were also gigs. There was going on tour doing the full show. Then there's taking excerpts of the show and doing like weddings. Those were really, really fun to do. And I also taught my teaching journey started in New York City when I was teaching for Amanda Selwyn Dance Theater in the outreach part of their organization called Notes in Motion, which had relationships with public schools in all 5 boroughs of New York City. Which is interesting because later on, eventually, like when I would come to move to Seattle and, eventually get into teaching here, it's very similar kind of to the Discover Dance program that PNB does that I've worked for. Obviously, like, different organizations have, like, their nuances for how they approach, but it is sort of like teaching kids about dance and about the process of coming up with dances. What did bring me here to Seattle was I auditioned for Spectrum Dance Theater in New York City, and I moved here in 2016. So I came as a paid apprentice, and basically I was a company member that was in every show. I just, the pay was a little bit different for me. I know that that year that I was accepted, more people were accepted into the company than were spots that of people that had left. So like 2 people left and then like 4 people were accepted, including like me, and then an additional apprentice who was already a student at Spectrum. So it was a time where the company was expanding. And so that's what brought me over here. And then I got promoted to full company member my second year. And then I moved on. And, the rest is sort of history. It's all been very fast. The past 4.5 years were not necessarily pre planned by me, but it's been wonderful to kind of go along with the ride. For people who know me, if you see my bio, I've danced for a lot of people in Seattle. Uh, and you can look all those people up and their work. Yeah, I think like looking at my resume, at least just with the Seattle part of it, I've spent the majority of my professional dance career and my adult life in Seattle thus far. So that's a really interesting, cool thing.
That's amazing. The amount of like just the extensive resume that you were like, yeah, this and then this and then this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would even like Steps on Broadway. I would even to be in the studio would be like a dream come true for me. That would be amazing. So that's phenomenal. It's amazing. What is your primary dance style? Is it like ballet, modern? Kind of what do you prefer of dance styles?
I would say that my primary style is modern. I am one of a few people that I can count on one hand currently that teaches the Horton that can teach the Horton technique specifically, or like knows it well enough to teach it to other people. And not all of my work is based on Horton, absolutely not. But I definitely think that, it does have some influence on where I'm coming from, but I'm also like in my own personal work, I am trying to move the way that I want to move more often because obviously like my training up until a certain point had a certain goal in mind. For example, like growing up, I really looked up to the Alvin Ailey company. And so because I really wanted to be in that company, I kind of like tailored my training and literally went to the school to, to get closer to that goal. I have friends in the company, it is definitely like there are a lot of really hardworking people in that building. A lot of people go through that building. So just to be in the room there in and of itself is a privilege. Like I wouldn't have the connections that I do if it wasn't for that experience. So, but right now I am trying to be more true to what I want to see because I create dances in my head all the time that I never got to you know, put forth into the world because I was focused on doing other people's work.
What is a challenge that you've experienced in dance, and what advice would you give others struggling with the same issue?
One challenge is I would say, well, there's a couple I wanted to talk about, but I think one for me as a freelancer is how to manage your schedule because if you're working for a bunch of different organizations at the same time as I have and I do, everything's not going to necessarily line up perfectly with, what is convenient for me. Like, and I know that, right? So that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. The dance world in general. I mean, there's a lot of things in this world that are very short staffed, right? And in the dance world, specifically in the United States of America, it doesn't get a lot of funding. And so what I find is that unless you are some big organization like PNB or like Ailey or New York City Ballet or, these sort of big names, you often can't give people enough work to just only commit to dancing for you. That's because most dance companies are just smaller in general, and that's what they can afford financially. And so you might have, for example, like a company that I danced for 4 years was Kambata Dance Company. And, Kambata Dance Company, wonderful opportunity. You go, I've been on tour to Germany, India, and France, internationally. We've been to Rhode Island twice while I was there. And wonderful opportunities, still very small company, only 6 people. It's still not a full-time company, right? I mean, like, obviously everybody involved in it would love it to be, you know what I mean? But we would only rehearse twice a week. And so because it's such a big commitment, those 2 times a week are a big commitment to be there 2 times a week. So it's very serious business when you are there. However, you know, people do have other jobs, to support themselves in these companies. And so a lot of the scheduling ends up being based on the availability of the people who are in it. And that can shift, right? Some companies are flexible like that with Kambata where it would shift to like what the preference of or like the average preference between the people in it. And for some, organizations, it's not that flexible, and it can be an issue. And so, for I mentioned Discover Dance, right? And those that is a wonderful program that doesn't necessarily happen all year long. Like there's different P&B has to form a relationship with the schools and sort of cater how they do things to their program to what that school is able to provide in terms of like the space where the kids are and what day it can be on based on the school schedule is very subjective, right? So even I as a teaching artist going into that situation, I have to be very adaptable to sort of what is needed in that moment, and it's not going to be the same every time. So I might do a certain project or teaching job for a certain amount of time. And let's say I did something on like a Monday and a Tuesday morning, and I had to block out my time to do that thing on Mondays and Tuesday mornings, but that thing doesn't happen all year. So once that thing is over, then you have that space free, and it's like you have a wildly different schedule once it's over, and it affects other things as well. So sometimes when I say, when I'm considering my availability for things, I have to consider what's something coming up in the future that I know I want to do, and do I have an idea of what days those will be. Sometimes there's things that I want to do, and like my schedule is like Tetris, and there might be something, my schedule might be the way it is because of like a hole that was left from something else that I already did, and it's just this kind of like rolling thing. So everything is kind of affected by everything else. So, and navigating that is definitely a challenge.
What inspired you to become a DWC ambassador?
What inspired me to become a DWC ambassador was that I saw the social media component of the job, and I realized that I kind of already, like, because I dance for so many different organizations, I'm already promoting shows that I'm in, organizations that I work for. And it wasn't necessarily like my job to do that, but because I have knowledge of so many different organizations from working with them, I realized the opportunity, like I can be sort of a source of information for people who might not know about those organizations, and I can do it in like this very official way. I can be sort of an ambassador for dance in the area, and I think that the clothing aspect of it is a plus, like the gear and all that, because we all love good dance gear that we feel good in. I like that Dancewear Center isn't just a dance clothing store. Like, I like that there's an aspect of it that is focused on the local community, and really just it's about also using it as a resource to connect. I find that there are a lot of artists in the city that I see as being sort of like staples of this community. And these people, Seattle's a really great place for individual artists to have a name, right? And that's wonderful. But you have a lot of people who've been living here for like 5+ years who don't know each other. And it's so interesting to me because I came from New York City, that is a place that's so huge, and like maybe it's because it's so big and so oversaturated with people that people may be like put a little bit more of an effort to like know what is going on. That's just sort of my bias after like living here for 6.5 years and sometimes being shocked that Seattle's a lot smaller. It's a city, but it has a small town feel, and there are artists who like I witnessed them meet each other for the first time. And I think it's so odd because we're all like, ships passing in the night, but we're so close. It's not like a huge night sky. It's like a little, but you just like miss people if you just, you could be hanging out in the dance space down the block. And if you never cross to the other side, there's certain people who are just not a part of your world, even though it's all so close. And so I just want to help people realize what opportunities for connection there are out there. And also just to show how organizations are changing and growing in real time. I think that we can sort of have an idea of an institution or company, and we have a very fixed idea of, an experience or a show we saw but everybody's always evolving, everybody's always thinking of the next thing, everyone's planning the next season, and it's like, it's about growing with each other, and not just staying stuck in one mentality as a community.
And kind of tagging on to the same like ambassador question, what are you looking forward to most about becoming an ambassador?
The thing that I'm looking forward to most, is my next takeover. That was really fun. It's like, oh my god, I get to feel like an influencer. I look forward to that. I look forward to the blog posts, honestly. I really admire people who are good at writing about dance, and I hope that I can sort of dive into giving information in a way that helps people find clarity and understanding in something that's going on in their community, or just being a responsible reporter in a sense. I think that the written word is so influential in how people perceive our community, like specifically the dance community, because it is so misunderstood. And there's a lot out there, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of incomplete story even within us as a community, and our mindsets are definitely influenced by the people that have the power of the pen or the keyboard, or and that is something that is very important to dance, because even though dance is this powerful art form that we all love and we get to express ourselves through our bodies, it is limited in that, like, sometimes it's hard to explain nuance, and I want to help with that.
Yeah. No, great. I saw your takeover on the Instagram, obviously, and I was like, oh, I already love them. Like, this is great. I love it. They're like an influencer. I love it. I always look forward to seeing the ambassador takeovers because you really get to see like who they are as a person. And I was like, I already love them. This is great. Like, this is gonna be this.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. I got a good day to do it because there was a lot happening this past weekend. Yeah, there was a whole lot happening, and I think I have a newfound appreciation for, like, the people who do choose to be influencers, because I couldn't do that all the time. Like,
No.
you know what I mean? Like, like Tyler Peck status, or like Misty Copeland status,
Oh
you
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
being an influencer and all of that. It's definitely one of those things where it is a double-edged sword. Like, it's really interesting that, like, that's how some people see me, as like influencer status, because I didn't have an Instagram until I moved to Seattle. Like, I was in like the dark ages. You know what I mean? Everybody else had an Instagram, but it was before Instagram became a news outlet. um,
Yeah.
it was when Instagram was just pictures.
Mhm. Yeah.
And now it's like bigger than Facebook. Like, Facebook bought it, but and so on one hand, like, the reason why I want to provide clarity is because there is so much junk out there.
Mhm.
And the competition for recognition and visibility on this new platform has just heightened everything. And it's the same issues, it's just like heightened all of them. And I kind of want to use my platform on the internet to influence people to get off the internet and actually like go see some shows in real life now that we're in person, and get to know people that you don't know already, and not just be so stuck in, like, how you see things, but like create new opportunities, because we are all creating each other's paths, and we don't kind of recognize that, but it is important. Like, my path can influence your path influences my path, our conversation right here is going to influence people watching it. And so even if it seems like it's small, you know the written word matters, the takeovers matter, the gear that you wear matters, and how you feel in your class. And yeah, I want people to just be talking to each other in person more.
What change would you like to see made in the dance world, and what steps can be taken to move towards that change?
Okay. I I have a lot of things with this one, and I'm gonna try to sum it all up. I think that one change is transparency between those in power in a situation and those working for them, like employee employer kind of relationships, whether it's a school or a company. Oftentimes we want change, but there's no streamline for how feedback is given or received. Sometimes it's usually not until like there's some kind of issue or some kind of drama, or that like people want to address things. But I want to I think it should be more normalized for every dance institution for feedback to be given, and it can be in a way that's like really organized. Like we're going to set aside this time to get feedback on how our organization how people are experiencing our organization, the people that work for it, but just so it's not always the awkward thing of like the person having to bring something up. Sometimes it could just be a normal like short conversation, like you know there could be no issue. It's just like checking in with how dancers or students or parents are just kind of doing, and not necessarily waiting until there's some big issue, but just like having like constant communication and having that sort of like open door. I know that makes people like a lot of nervous because, we are all very sensitive about our art, right? And, we all make decisions that we feel are the best based on what we can do. And the only mistake is we know what our intentions are. However, how that ends up affecting, the people that work for us, could be different than we intended.
Mhm.
And so that's just, it is smart and logical to account for that in any organization, right? That functions. And, that's just like a professional thing. But I feel like in the dance world, because we like put this thing on this pedestal and we revere it so much, like we don't want to like ruin what we revere about it. So we don't address a lot of things that are problems.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I would say, setting aside time for that type of feedback, however you want to do it in your organization. And then something also about like the art of dance that I want to see more of is there's a lot of typecasting in dance, and like there's typecasting in all performing arts, but I want to see more of conversations around typecasting, just because in theater, right, an actor knows the role that they're auditioning for, right? And they even if they know that they're not the type that that role usually goes to, like sometimes theaters will like typecast, or they will intentionally go against the type. Like for example, like I was the assistant choreographer for Little Shop of Horrors at Village Theater, and usually the character of Audrey is played by a white woman, and it is usually like an intentional choice to cast her as a different race, right? And that's like an intentional, like we're gonna keep that character the same, but like intentionally like do like a different casting for that. But people sort of go into the audition knowing the history of a role, right? So they know they could be typecast or typed against that, going against that like stereotype, right? In dance world, specifically in concert dance, especially with modern and contemporary, like I feel like there is still typecasting, but it's like very under the radar, under the surface, like, and it doesn't get talked about a lot in terms of like what type of dancer someone sees you as and how you get put into roles. Because as dancers, we kind of sign up for companies, and we don't necessarily we don't always audition for specific roles. It's like you join a company, and you get placed where you get placed, essentially. Like if it's a ballet company, classical, it's a little bit more structured, where like if you're a male ballet dancer, like you will could be asked to be like the prince or the jester or the king with the beard, or the lexicon of roles that are there. But when you get to like contemporary dance and things that are more malleable, people think that they don't have stereotypes or typecasts, but I feel like they still pop up in terms of like one simple thing is even like gender, like how people see gender roles, even in contemporary dance, and how we see bodies and how we stereotype bodies. And, it's harder to talk about because it is a little bit more ambiguous, but because it is more ambiguous, it kind of like is more pervasive. And I don't know if anyone watching this like else would feel that way. Like maybe we'll get some feedback or comments that that is something that people also feel, but it's something that I notice.
Those are all fabulous answers. Those are all of the questions that I have for you. Thank you so much for meeting with me. At DWC, we're so excited to have you as an ambassador.